will then be a world family. He would have every letter read out to him. I know that even from the beginning he started me on this. He wanted me, he pushed me to it. So that in that way I could really say it's from Baba to all of his children. Because after it was done, it was read to him, Eruch would read out to him, and I'd be called, and Baba said, that was the best. But then when I found each one was the best, it means he was satisfied. He would add, he would delete, he would say, no, not this, no, put that in, what about this message, and then it would. So it was all the time going from him. And then when I say, now it's done, because after a while, even the family letters grew, more of my time would go in that, and I would discuss with Eruch some points, with Francis and all, and then I'd type out in between whenever I had time. And by the time the completed thing got done, it took quite some time. So I'd heave a sigh of relief, and I won't even think about it for another month at least, you see. And in 15 days, Baba would look at me very innocently and say, aren't you writing another family letter? Baba, it's only just gone. It's barely 2 weeks. I mean, so just reached them 2 weeks ago. Oh, I see. Yeah, sure. 2 days later, oh, you were busy. You were writing the family letter? But Baba, no, that really was from him to you all, no doubt. I would sit sometimes in a room here in which we keep onions. We used to keep a lot of onions. It's the onion godown, we call it. We still to this day call it the onion godown, although now the onions I think are placed somewhere else, plus here. But it used to be full of onions. So when I couldn't type here, for some reason I forget, I would go into that room, somehow manage to put a little tipoy there and a chair and do my typing of the family letters there. And I think the ammonia probably gave me inspiration more than I would think. But I would keep incense sticks there, and I could watch. I could watch Baba's door, the Mandali Hall door from there, you see. So I could know when Baba was coming out. I could rush over and... But then we had forgotten one thing, that room is the room Baba first sat in seclusion in Meherazad. When first we came to Meherazad, Baba established his home here and his base here, because many, many years were spent here. In fact, in one place without traveling, Baba has spent more time in Meherazad than anywhere else. I didn't realize that that's the room Baba sat in seclusion when he first came to Meherazad by himself before we came and settled here. But there is a Baba lover whom we call Treebeard, Will Davis.
Yeah, Will
He is so close to trees and plants and things that he will refer to them as she, as he. He will touch a tree and say, oh, he's good, he's good. And then he touched some wood somewhere, and even that he was saying, this is good. Or some he would. So when he came over with me to that side where the onion godown was, for some reason, he touched the wood and said, oh, this is good. By that time I said, well, he's crackers. I mean, this good is an old door. This wood is just an old door, and the paint peeling off. And I thought this tree and living wood is something, but this, well, it's all right now. I can take things with a grain of salt. Even as I thought that in a flash, another flash came to me. But he's right. That is when I remembered. This is the room Baba sat in seclusion in. And so this room really has that, and he felt it. Yes, he's good, that door.
Is that room still here? The onion room?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Is that
Yes.
a little shed over there?
That last green door, it has a lock on it, just right across here.
Do you remember Eruch, when Baba visited Avatar's abode in 1958, he stayed at the Bellevue Hotel in Brisbane.
Yeah.
That hotel has been demolished now.
But that
But-
cottage where we stayed,
It's all been demolished
even the cottage is demolished.
in the name of progress. But do you know that, excuse me, I have an interest in making lead lights and stained glass. And I particularly like getting old doors, stripping them of their paint and restoring them and putting lead light in them. I've done a lot of them. And I often would go to Brisbane to the demolition yards. These are the companies that demolish the buildings and then sell the second-hand materials. And I was fortunate one day to go to the demolition yard that had demolished the Bellevue Hotel and bought 5 of the doors from the hotel, which I've sold 2 of them now to Baba lovers who are building their homes on Mayor Road, and they've been put on as front doors. I've forgotten to tell you that.
But while we're talking of trees, I recall something that was unusual, to say the least. When we were in Satara, and Baba was in seclusion for a while in an old place, but Eruch, what was the name of the place Baba was with Elisha? The master, it wasn't Jalvila, it was no, Rosewood is where you all lived.
The lake.
Huh? Burke's bungalow, probably. I don't know. It was an old little place, rooms, couple of rooms, mud walls. So Baba was in seclusion there, and the mast Elisha was with him. That gentle, beautiful mast. You have seen pictures of him. That gentle white beard, and he would. So Mehera and I were told to go and see him twice a week, or some period like that. Otherwise, he was in absolute seclusion. None of us others could see him. So once when we went there because there are lovely walks in Satara, we walked to the place we'd been in with Baba. Baba showed us Elisha and just sat around. Baba asked some things. And outside that house was a big tree, a fresh green tree with lovely fresh green leaves. We always remembered that, like as before you enter, you see that tree. And one day as we came out of Baba's room to go back to our place, Grafton, we saw that tree was broken. The top of the trunk was broken. There'd been a sort of a window to it, and there was a live fire. There was a flame, not just a flame, there was a fire. But the trunk was green, the leaves, the branch that had fallen down was green, the rest of the leaves on it were green, and here it was a bright fire. Lovely. It was a lovely sight to see this fire blazing in a green tree. So when we told Baba, I think we went back the next day, and Baba said that was from his work. That was a spark that flew out from the work he was doing. That was the significance of it, was his work. That's the only thing he said. And I realized that's why we thought it was terrifically unusual just to see it. And then, of course, we listened to these lines of the ghazals which were sung to Baba. And here's this lover who says, who has this glass of wine. It's all divine significance. I mean, it's not meant in the sense that we understand it. But here the lover has this glass of wine that the beloved has poured, and he holds it. And in the agony of his love, the tears have fallen into the glass and mixed with the wine. So this lover tells someone, don't touch my glass, or your hands will burn. There is the fire of my love has mixed with the wine. Don't touch it. And things like that, we cannot even have a glimpse when Baba tells us that divine love is an ocean of fire, that it is no joke. that this path is not for the weak-hearted, the faint-sighted. And that is why the real warriors are those who can go through this path in this life, in obedience, in love. And then there was this other song in which the pigeon says, the pigeon that's carrying a message, a note from the lover to the beloved, the carrier pigeon. And the lover says that the pigeon that was carrying my note to my beloved, the pigeon was burned because of the fire that was in the pen, the words that I wrote. That's where Baba used to, when he would talk of Baba Jan, and he would say that she was emperor, and that was not for the faint-hearted. That she was real man in the real sense, and that is why Baba Jan herself never referred to herself or allowed anybody to refer to her as woman. Amma Jan, she would have been called Amma Jan by rights in the ordinary way, but she was Baba Jan. If anybody dared call her Amma Jan, she would be at them, you know. But that and that's what Baba says. When that happens, there is nothing to say. Nothing. It is silence then. And the illustration which I've said a number of times, how Baba would say, we want to know through the mind that which is beyond the mind, which mind cannot touch, but we can only take it in through the mind. So we ask him for explanations of things which are beyond the mind, to please give it to us so we can take it through the mind. So Baba one day said, because he is so compassionate, he comes to our level. He gives, to each one as we can digest, at least we can take in. But, he says, then once he gave this illustration, he said, supposing a child were to come to you, someone grown up and married was sitting before him. But the question was going on between him and Baba. So Baba said, supposing a child comes to you and says, tell me all about marriage. How could you tell him? When the child grows up, he will know from his experience what marriage means, what sex means, what wife means, all that he will know. Then there will be no question. Once he knows, there is nothing to question. But if he were to ask you, what would you say? How? You can say, but how will you make the child know? But you can tell the child about the wedding. You can tell him that the bride wore this, and the groom did that, and the mother-in-law cried, and the cake was so big, and what it contained, and the ring was such and such, and the lace was from Italy. Baba's making these gestures, I'm making the words. All this, on and on. So Baba says, when you ask me, I'm really telling you about the wedding. But when inside you know of that marriage, then there is silence. There's nothing to ask, nothing to say.
Great.
Baba, when he would even explain like that, it was simplicity itself. Because truth is simple. Baba said once, seated right here, something had happened, and Baba said, it is so simple that it's almost impossible. Because we cannot take the simple. We must have some shape, we must have trimmings, we must have bows, we must have color, we must have something that which attracts so naturally. But the real is so simple. So when Baba would say things like that, to me they have been the real sermons, the real discourses, casually, like this that I just described, or like somebody who always was harping on God realization. We don't even know what we are talking about when we talk of things like that and ask him to, just to tell you, but what can you tell? So when this person It's always somebody visiting, by the way. None who are living with him had questions. And if they had, it was because somebody else had a question. So this person was there, and again, very lightly talking about the God realization, you see, the God realization. And Baba said to him, there were no carpets here, by the way. It's just Shabbat stone flooring. We have a stone flooring underneath this. So Baba just pointed to that. And he said, you see that? And the man looked, yes, stone. And Baba asked him a question. What is the difference between that stone and you as a person? And he said, oh, wow, I mean, he knows that. I said, what a difference, stone and me. He said, oh, wow. Exactly, said Baba. That is the difference between you and a God-realized state. After that, the man never brought up that. The time when he told Mother, and Mother was pained to find that he's fasting and not eating, that he's observing silence, because his voice was beautiful. Even his detractors, even our community who harassed Mother so much in the beginning, who couldn't take him to be what he is, and who really were all out to harass Mother because she was his mother. Even they conceded that is true. He had a beautiful voice. Yes. And then they would look like, and they say, well, even when we were doing our work, cooking, washing dishes, no matter what, and we would hear him sing the Munajat in Persian, we would stop to listen. And then they would come down to earth and say, but that's not enough. That's not enough to give himself airs as to who does he think he is. So they couldn't take it. Yes, so even it pained Mother that he should observe silence, imprison his voice, no longer talk, sing. He loved doing that. And also that he would fast. You see that picture? The last one on the left, that is after a long fast. But that does not mean that Baba would sit in a room fasting. Baba was more energetic. Baba would do everything. I mean, you had to keep running after him. As a matter of fact, we still do. But, Baba was just so vibrant. But then it pained Mother as to see her son fasting, being on silence. So at that time, all those around Baba were very young. And so Mother one day said, Meryl, why do you have to fast? Why do you have to keep silence? You have nothing to gain, so you're doing it for them. That's what you say. So why not make them do it? Make these chits around you, make them do it, make them observe silence, make them observe fast. And then Baba said something. He said, if they all, but you see gestures, we interpret to our understanding or to the circumstance in which these gestures were made, but this could have meant the universe. This is all around him. This could mean the whole world. This could mean the whole universe. Anyway, this was his gesture. He said, if all observed fast for the rest of their lives, it wouldn't equal 1 day of my fast. And if all observed silence for the rest of their lives, it wouldn't equal 1 hour of my silence. And Mother didn't say anything after that. So you see that that he does for us on our behalf. But because he's perfection, as I said, the fruits are perfect. We could do it whole lives, all together, all of us together. It wouldn't equal 1 day of his fasting. So if he fasts for months, just imagine what we reap. What harvest is ours from his doing, or from the silence. That's why when Baba gave silence to somebody, and that person wanted to continue silence, Baba was angry. I mean, his eyes flashed. He said, you observe silence only when I tell you. That has meaning. And then he also explained that when you have silenced yourself, your desires and lust and greed and anger and all that, even as a person, only then your observing silence can have any meaning, except when it's for me, like the 10th July, or when I tell you to keep silence. And the same thing for the fast. When you have fasted yourself inside so that there is nothing, then if you observe fast, it has a fruit. Otherwise, the Baba said it's good if you keep silence. It'll help everybody else. You talk too much anyway. Yes, these little sermons. And there's the one which everybody, I think, has heard so many times. I think Dara has on his tape, I think 5 times. But some of you might like to hear this because Eruch always reminds me about this. I'll say it in short. You know, we had a Cocker Spaniel. His name was Peter. He was very much with Baba even on his travels since 1953, which is when we got him in Missouri. He was second in Baba's affection for pets. First was Mastan, a bigger dog. But this little Peter, wise little fellow, who was always with Baba wherever Baba would go for a walk, or when he would come from there, from the women's side, to be in the Mandali's hall in the mornings and in the afternoon. Peter was there before him, flapping his long ears, and he would then come and lie down at Baba's feet after Baba sat right here, and he had a habit of snoring, very much like a human snore. In fact, I was stunned one day when I was in Baba's room, and we women were seated around him, and I was reading out one of the books, Tolkien or Woodhouse or Rextout or something, and I heard a snore. And I said, I can't believe it. Baba seated before us? Who is it that's snoring? I looked at Naja. No, she had her eyes closed, but she wasn't asleep. I looked at each of them, and then suddenly I realized the snore was almost underneath my chair, and that was Peter. So he would come and sleep here and snore, and when Eruch or somebody had to show Baba something across, they had to go across Peter. Everything had to be done across Peter. He said Baba would lean over, and they would lean over. So Baba called me one day. There used to be 2 bells at this Mandali Hall gate, this big door. A bigger one was for Goher. When Baba wanted Goher, Eruch would ring that bell. When Baba wanted me, there was a smaller bell. So one day my little bell rang. I rushed from where I was doing some typing. Baba was seated here, and he said, look at this. Look at this fellow. And he was snoring. Peter was snoring right at his feet. And we all laughed. And I said, Baba, shall I take him away? Does it disturb you? Let the bugger be. Leave him. So I went. Just 2 days later, again the bell rang. Again I was called, so the little bell rang and I came. Again it was the same scene. There was Baba seated here, and there was Peter lying at his feet. And this time he wasn't just lying quietly and snoring. He was dreaming, and he was excited. And his paws were going so fast that had he been cycling, it would be 50 miles an hour. Very fast, and he was very excited, and he was making all these sounds. And his brow was so furrowed that the ear came forward, and one eye was completely covered. You know that actress Carol Lombard always had hair across her? Well, he was like that. He was very excited. And I thought again, just to show me, how amusing all this is. But then Baba said something which struck me later as one of my little, as one of his simple sermons, as I call it, like the ones that I described to you now. And Baba looked at him and said, look at him. He thinks some wild animal is chasing him, or he's been chased by a wild animal, and he's crossing through the desert, up over the mountains, crossing rivers, all these gestures Baba was doing. And he thinks that's what all he's doing. And yet, all the time, is safe and sound at my feet. I said, fine. After a while, Baba said, go, and I went. And then it struck me. I said, but Baba's saying is, that's what we go through. We think we're going through all this, and look what we're doing, and all this is happening, and help. And therefore Baba says, don't worry, because all the time we're safe and sound at his feet. Oh yes, he would go with Baba also for walks in Satara when Baba would go over. And Baba would come in the afternoon when he would return, he would tell us some funny things that Peter did. And Baba said, Peter thinks he's a cat. He goes up a tree. And then he did go up to the tip of the branch once, but he couldn't turn round. And then he went plop.
And always he used to take bath in that pond, the dirty pond.
Ah, of course, every pond.
And the Baba used to say, now they will have to clean it. The ladies will have to clean it now. Every time.
Ah, I forgot that. It's good to be, yeah.
Peter would be about 17 now in a human birth, wouldn't he?
Peter? Yes, sir. Yeah. You know, that reminds me of the family we got Peter from. It's a very interesting story. Just one little story, now I have to go. We were in Mussoorie. Kumar Babu did all the arrangements, a beautiful house there, and we went from Dehradun with Baba to Mussoorie for some days. And he had put on the door sill, on the top, at the entrance, a whole big sprig from a bush of yellow roses, a whole branch filled with little yellow roses, wild yellow roses. We'd never seen that. And therefore we thought at first that it's not real. And then we found that it's real, that everywhere you go in Mussoorie, and the hedges are just rose bushes and rose hedges made of that. Anyway, when we were there, it was on a hill, beautiful place. If we went a little further up to this outhouse, we could see the top of some of the Himalayan mountains. So below us, as we had to go down the hill to get on the road and go for walks, there was another bungalow, a cottage, where there were two sisters. They were English, Mrs. McLeod and Miss Cooper, L.O. Cooper. We don't know her name, her initials, L.O. Cooper. So we got friendly on the way, nothing about Baba. We were told not to say, and we never mentioned about who he is or what. They must have seen him go down. They must have been curious, but no talk. So she would say how her name was L.O. Cooper, but that the Indian nurses she worked with, the people, the helpers she worked with, couldn't pronounce L.O., so they would say Yellow Cooper. And she would tell them, I'm anything but yellow. Anyway, her sister, Mrs. McLeod, had these Cocker Spaniels. And those Cocker Spaniels had a litter of puppies. And they gave most of them away, all of them away, except Peter. Because somehow Mrs. McLeod said he was special. She wouldn't even leave Mussoorie in the winter because who would look after the dogs, her pets? It was that kind of thing. Now, this L.L. Cooper had been a linen keeper in a big hotel in Agra. So she said she met all the big personalities, many of them. She met the Aga Khan there, and Errol Flynn, and all kinds of names she'd said. And one day she said, and now Meher Baba. I have met Meher because she saw him go by. She knew the name, but we didn't talk about him. Then anyway, we got this little Peter from them. I won't go into that because once I get into that story, it's a long story. But then later when we went back to Dehradun, Peter coming with us and all, it was a bungalow, and one day we were seated with Baba in the hall, and suddenly this lady walks in, and we were amazed to find that it was Mrs. Cooper, L.O. Cooper. She just walked in. We were surprised. I was reading something to Baba, and she walked up to Baba and put out her hand. Baba shook her hand, shook hands with her, and said, I'm happy. She sat for a while. We just talked of things. And then she said, well, Baba, I must go. Baba said, fine. So she went again to Baba, put out her hand. Baba was standing now. Put out her hand, and when Baba put his hand in hers, she quickly took it and put it on her head, flat, and said, bless me, Baba. We were amazed. And Baba said yes, and pressed his hand on her head. She walked out. We never saw her again, and very shortly after that she died. Because I used to keep in touch with her, send pictures of Peter and all. But you see, when you're so blessed, so fortunate, you can be prompted to do that. She must have known. We never spoke of it. So she finds out the house we're living in Dehradun. She comes all the way there, walks up to Baba, takes his hand, puts it on her head. Bless me, Baba.
Meeting with MeherBaba was just this. I was a kid. I think it was about 9 years of age I was. And I don't know what made my parents go there, but later on I hear that my uncle, maternal uncle, and my mother's home is here in Ahmednagar. You know where Meher Colony is?
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. At that time it was a huge place. It belonged to some Mohammedan, and it's known as Akbar Press. Akbar Ali was the owner of it. It was a cotton and ginning factory, cotton factory. They used to card the cotton, ginning, take this cotton seeds out. And then it was also carding, means ginning and pressing. So they would press into bales and then export or send out to the mills for weaving and all that sort of thing. So it was a big factory over here. And this is a cotton area. Cotton used to grow, not now. So my maternal grandfather was the manager and engineer, employed. So he used to be here, and naturally the children grew up. My mother grew up too. She had her education in Clara Bruce school here that is there, if you have noticed the board while going. There is somebody selling books, these comics and all that, in that same compound, Clara Bruce.
School is that old, huh?
Yeah, that old. So my mother used to study there. My uncles used to study in different schools and all that. When they grew up, naturally, they are from Ahmednagar. So my mother grew up, she married and she went away with her husband, naturally. So we were away from Ahmednagar. But my uncles remained in Ahmednagar. They were going, some were employed in Bombay, and some got the employment here in Ahmednagar, and one of them became a political leader. So they were all here. One day, my mother seems to have received a letter from one of the uncles here, saying that, oh, guess whom we met. And there he described there that, well, as we met a certain personality, you see, that reminded us of Zoroaster having come again. So my mother's enthusiasm was fired, because she was also, you see, she had studied the lives of the great ones, the saints. Great ones means not the leaders or anything, but some of the saints and all that. So she had that inclination from her young age, to see these people, serve them, love them. She was a God-fearing woman, my mother. It's a wrong misnomer to say God-fearing, because there was nothing to fear. She was a God-loving person. We always use these terms, God-fearing and all that. It's not that. Really speaking, it is God-loving person. So, when she heard this, well, her heart wanted to just come back and see who the person is. And my uncle, who is the oldest, who was, of course, he's no more, he was much older than my mother. And he was of it, he was a theosophist. And he had a huge library. And every now and then he would tutor my mother, and my mother would just listen to his stories and listen to him and revered him, not as brother, loved him not as brother, but revered him as somebody great, a saintly person. He was a bachelor, but he was on a very big post in one of the mills in Nagpur.
Which one there?
Merji Mama. So she told my uncle, who was with her at the time, in a different place, says, this is the letter. So my uncle, of course, took it with a bit of, well, he didn't scoff at the thought of it, but you know how theosophists are. They are very guarded, you see, in trying to believe anything other than God himself. So yeah, there are people, there are saintly people and all that. We shouldn't jump to conclusions unless we,
Taste them.
we test them. That was the bent of mind of my uncle. But my mother was quite different. So the first opportunity that was afforded was the Christmas holidays that we used to get in the British regime. It was not just 1 or 2 days. The children would get a month's holiday that would cover up not only Christmas but also New Year and further on. So she was waiting for that. As soon as we had our Christmas vacation, then she gathered her children and came to Ahmednagar. And when she was there in Ahmednagar, naturally, usually at the Christmas time, other children would also have holidays. So her sister's children, her own children, her brother's children, they were all gathered in a family home here, in the Salba Press. And my grandfather was still the manager and engineer, still working there. That compound that you see now is, it has lost its beauty, you know. Otherwise it would be like heaps of snow there, you know, cotton, all mounds of cotton would be there, and very nice atmosphere was there. There was an orchard there, big orchard was there in the compound. All that is lost. Now it has been rented and all the factories have come up and it's nothing.
Run down.
Yeah, the children would love to play. People would come there and sit in the garden and orchards and enjoy picnics and all that. So what had happened was, when my mother came, she inquired from my uncle, says, well, you wrote to us, we'd love to go there. When are you taking us? The day that she arrived. He says, oh, he just came yesterday with all the children. At the time there were boys, you know, Prem Ashram boys and all. So Baba would come, bring them and have a nice picnic there at Akbar Press. He says, we missed them. We should go there. So he says, all right, we'll go. So that's how my uncles provided. At that time there were no buses running or anything. So it's a 5-mile distance, you know. We did have horse tongas, you see. And you all missed the sight of the tongas that we had at the time. There were 2 horses in a tonga, broader ones they were. But now they are no more in vogue. So they were more commodious than the little contraption that you see. You still see tongas, no? Horse carriages. They are known as tongas, but 1 horse. But there were 2 horses also. And there were tongas of bullocks also. The bulls used to draw the tongas also. They were cushioned and all that sort of thing. Yeah, you lost that side because they are out of vogue now. So there were bullock and horse tongas there, single tongas there, depending upon how big the family is. But apart from all this, the families who could afford, they used to have the horse carriages also, personal carriages. Victorias we call them, hackney carriages. What do you all call?
Carriages.
Yeah, about 5 people can easily sit, like a car. The horse will get. So we had 2 of them there. Because big family, they had 2 carriages. So they arranged and the family, my uncle, my aunts, my mother and the children who were there. Well, we are driving. We get into these carriages. But you're asking me how I met. So now the story is that when they entered the carriages, there was no room for me. I was a big one. So it's no good occupying a lot of space. Two could occupy, you see, instead of me. So my mother says, why don't you get out from there and sit on that at the back? At the back where the groom stands. Mm-hmm. There's a stand there, holding umbrella and all that. It's a round little flat piece there. So my mother says, go and sit there. There is no room here. Because if you don't sit here, then two others will sit. I had a big panic.
How old were
women
you?
Are here.
How old are you now?
I was about 9 years.
9?
About 9. So that's how it was. So I sat there. I enjoyed. It's a nice ride. Legs dangling and all that. No encumbrances around, you see. Yeah, breezy. So the horse carriages are moving. Horses are taking us faster and faster and all that. And I don't know what's happening inside the carriages. They are having a chat and conversation and all that. You know how, especially when the Zoroastrian family is all together, it's loud noise. Same like Jews.
Italians too.
Italians too, okay. Then we are all of the same feather, So that's how it is. So all of a sudden I hear my name, my mother shouting my name. Says, Eruch, jump. And so I, without taken unawares, you see, the first thing that I used to do is to carry out what my mother says. So I just jumped from that running carriage, you see. And when I jumped, it was in the opposite direction. The momentum is this way and I jump this way. It means what happens? I go flat on my... I don't have the direction to carry on with the momentum. So I fell flat on my back and severely bruised my elbow. And it started bleeding. And in the meantime, the carriages went further and they stopped. I can see that. And why did my mother ask me to jump here? I don't know. I was surprised myself. So I am just, I had to fall. Luckily I had good pads, Yeah. So it didn't matter. Anything was not, it was bruised, but not, no bones were cracked or broken or anything, but this elbow was terribly bruised. It was wounded, hurting much. And blood is dripping there. So I carry my elbow and I'm walking the distance where they are. I don't know where they are going and why are we. We were told that we are going out for 5 miles ride or something like that. It says children, who care? So when I go there, all are settled around a certain person I see. Who has squatted like this, you see? Who was there? And so I'm going there and I don't know where. So the person looks at me and signs there, what happened? So somebody says, what happened to you? So I told this person, that is Baba. I said, I fell down and I hurt my elbow and it's leaking, bleeding. So Baba called me and made me sit on his lap and he cuddled me and then fondled me and says, don't worry, don't cry. And he bent down and there was the dhuni pit in front of him. That dhuni pit that is there on the platform, it was not the original place. It was somewhere near the roadside at that time. And he was sitting here. There are all around him. As we sit here, there are people there. So he took the ash from there, he dabbed it and all that, and I don't know what he did. He did this and something, and he took out a handkerchief from there. He must be having a handkerchief like this, stuck there. He got it out and he bandaged my arm with this elbow joint. And he says, sit down. It must be too heavy. After a while he says, you sit here. And that's how it was. That was my first meeting with him. I don't know what transpired, but the first thought that I had was he's really loving, kind person. Nobody from my family budged or anything of the sort. Nobody cared for it. So that's how it was. I fell for him, in short. So
You made the jump.
Yeah, Baba was silent. Yeah, the recollection is that on either side there were slates at that time. And Baba was conversing with the slate, and it was funny for me. It was nice. Funny sight, you see, to see this man doesn't talk, others are all talking, and he's silent and he's writing. One slate, and then somebody reads, and that slate is put there. Somebody is cleaning the slate, erasing there, another slate is taken. It's like that. That picture is still there. But the thought that I had of him was a very nice person, kind person, as a child. Loving, kind person. That's the first meeting.
You don't know to this day why she said jump.
I asked, of course, I'm not that to leave her like that. So when I went back home, naturally, I had my bandage, that kerchief. I don't know where that kerchief is now. So I told my mother, she said, no, naturally they took great care of me while returning now. So they made me sit there. So when I went back home, when I was with my mother, I asked her, so why did you ask me to jump? There was still time. Distance had to be crossed. Why did you do that? So the funny answer she gives me at that time. And still, she is that type. So my mother says that at that time they pointed out to me, look, he's sitting there. And as my eyes fell on him, the thought that occurred to her at that time was that how would Baba feel if we are trying to overload the horse? Because the whole family. Yeah. So at least the thought was that my presence was the one that was the heaviest. You see. She said, jump.
So we make a nice picture entering.
Yeah.
Get rid of the
charisma.
Spare the horse, but...
Yeah, spare the horse, but kill the child.
We're very good to our horses.
Yeah. I said, is that the way? Says, yeah, that's the thought I got.
Probably.
Yeah. So see how the mind works.
How did it come to be that you ended up being with Baba though? You're 9 years old then and you met him, but you didn't stay with him then.
No, then what happened is, it was Christmas vacation, I told you. Yeah. So vacation means children vacation. Funny. Yeah. She knows what happened with Zach. He never remained here or here. He was playing here, there, jumping and all that. So we used to do that. Every now and then Baba would call us there. My mother would want to go every now and then. So we'd go there, but we wouldn't be near Baba. Only at the time when he would dole out, serve our lunch, you see. So we'll all be there with the plates on, first in row. Or tea time, I still remember those days, What delicious taste was there. Just simple dal and rice, but it was with condiments. We call it sambar type.
Chutneys and spices?
No, nothing chutney and spices. Rice and dal, but it is what do you call season? What do you call it? Spice seasoning. Yeah, seasoning was there. So just that. Dansak. Is there any English name for it? No. So that was the Baba would take the spoon and we would have aluminium plates with heaps of aluminium plates. Each one had to take the aluminium in hand, yeah. And this much I used to eat, and Baba would give me that. And we used to relish it. But tea time was the best time because at that time people would bring sweets and all, baskets of sweets would come.
Homemade stuff.
Yeah.
Just like Alaba has these.
Yeah, not this. Alaba is a stingy person. He just gives one biscuit. It's not in my nature to accept that, you see. If you want to give me enough. So that I can have my fill. Alaba just puts one biscuit there. I don't know where it goes. It just disappears in my mouth. So at that time Baba used to give handful of jalebis or sweets like that, you see. So it was nice to eat. And that was the center of attraction, not Baba. For us children, at least for me it was so. As I told you, I was glutton, how I ate the apple and all that. So it was fine. It was paradise for me to play there and Nice. There were many kids around and all that. So at tea time and lunch time, we were the first to be near the person who served, and that person happened to be Baba later on for me in my how I registered was this. I was some person who used to give us good food and all that. But every time you see at tea time, malaria was rampant here in this area in those days. So Baba would, at that time there were no capsules or tablets of quinine. We had powder. I don't know, they used to import most probably. Huh? Quinine you call it. We call quinine. Yeah. So what with that sweet, he would give a pinch, you see, of quinine or quinine. But with children, he wouldn't do that, knowing that they would throw it off, you see. So what they'll say, open your mouth if you want the sweet. Oh God. But that sweet was there, you see, the attraction was there, so we'll open our mouths, we'll put that bitter powder there and the whole mouth will become so bitter and all that. He says, now you eat, Baba, so eat, it will be sweet. But for a long time it won't go, that bitterness. It would just be there. But the quantity of sweets would be such that it would gradually overcome the bitterness and the mouths will become sweet. And that was even attraction. But that was the only part which I didn't like near Meher Baba, you see, in my childhood. So that's how it was. So days passed by and we would go back to our school and all. That's how it was. I went back to school. Formerly I was a boarder in Nasik. My father had an appointment with government. He was employed by the British government. So he was now on a big post. So my father thought that it's not good for the child to be a boarder now. He can have a property, he can establish himself at one place, have a home and all that. So my mother and my two kid sisters and myself were now brought in, made comfortable over a property. And we had a bungalow to live in and all that. It was fine. So I was put in a school. Schools at that time were such, those years were such that only missionary schools were considered to be the best schools. The rest of the schools were no good. They were schools, but if you want to have your children a good education, you should put them in missionary schools, where fathers and brothers would come from Germany and Italy and France and all that. So my father, holding such a responsible position, loving me, the only son, how it is. Naturally, must have good education. So he put me in that school, although it was, at that time too, it was considered to be a bit costly affair. So I was put there. And I enjoyed. The only thing was that all were Catholics, Roman Catholics, and I myself was non-Catholic. So these Catholic boys would treat me as a heathen, They wouldn't call me a non-Catholic and say, hey, heathens. They would talk among themselves as those heathens, heathens. First of all, I didn't understand the meaning, what they mean by heathens and all that. But gradually, I began to understand. By this time, I'm 9.5 years, 10 years old boy. I can understand all these things. I can see that how we are considered to be different from them and all that. And we were, according to our standard of living at that time, we were not at all different. They were different from us, because my standard of living was such, and these riffraffs call me this. That's how the youngster would feel in the mind. But still, there was no way out. The education was there, had to be taken. And the teachers were good, kind, very kind people, So I pulled on for some years, 2 years. And third year, it was made compulsory, There was that life of Jesus. We call them scripture classes and catechism classes. So that's how it was.
Were you forced to take that?
No. On the contrary, heathens were not supposed to take those classes. But on the contrary, there was a punishment for us. So we had to change our seats and go back behind the class, backbenchers. And we had to be there and then revise our lessons. And these Catholics would come in the forefront and they would attend the classes. And you just imagine, we all pass through that stage, you see, as children. If you are supposed to go and revise lessons there at the back, would you want to do it? On the contrary, you see, you'd play a lot of mischief. And mischief seems to be one of the traits you see in my younger age. I used to play a lot of mischief that, with a purpose. That stubbornness. You want me to sit quiet? I won't sit quiet. You all know that. So when the classes are being held and there is all solemnity and seriousness, and I could hear the venial sins and the cardinal sins and all that hell and heaven being so who cared for hell and heaven? One peanut, you see, would go and hit somebody's ear. And they would be doing that, you see, look somewhere back. And the father would be distracted, you see. Who did that? And nobody, all were quiet. But somehow or other, you see, I was spotted out. Eventually, I got caught. And once caught, it's caught forever. That's the rule. Come here, Jessawala, come here. Is this the way that you behave? No rod was spared at that time. Rod was much in use at the time to discipline the youngsters. Yeah. So naturally we had to kneel down and put our hands out. Put our hands out and slash. 4 shots, 6 shots, 8 shots, 10 shots, always in twos. So strong man, youngster, I'll take them and just smile and go back. Who cares for you people like that? So that was the time. So it so happened that it went on for a couple of years. We were deprived of play, game or anything of that sort. It went on for 2-3 years, much against our will, and we are now growing older and we are understanding and we know, we are aware, because when the usual reports go out, annual reports, naturally they are printed. They have the stamp of the principal and all that. And when we go there back home, our parents naturally my father wants to see how is the progress and what's the matter with you? Why these? So what would happen nowadays, you see, your reckoning is quite changed. We used to have the number of marks. 100% is 100% marks, and against it is 70%, 80%, 90% marks that you get. 90 marks means 90%, 80%. So we used to have those, and yet our ranks would be lowered. So the sum total would naturally denote the ranks. You stood first. Oh, how many percent you got? 850 marks I had. Means 85%. Oh. But we missed that because 200 marks from heathens were taken away. Because we
Because
never...
they were heathens.
Huh?
Because they were heathens?
No, because we didn't enter, we didn't sit for the examination for Catechism and the New Testament.
You didn't get
New
credit.
and the Old Testament, so credits for 200 marks we'd lose. Each paper would be 100 marks. So our ranks would be low. And our parents would get wild about it. We are spending so much money and what are you doing? You're playing there now. So every time it would be, pardon?
That's statistics.
Yeah. Every time, you see, it would be annual reports, quarterly reports would tell. So we were not fools. We are growing now, so we are registering all this, and we know the root cause of it is that we are deprived of all this. All right, we don't care for this thing, but at least let us go and play outside. We are kept as prisoners there at the back of the class. So that was the turmoil in the youngsters at the time. Roman Catholic school, famous school, nobody can speak or anything. So mischief was still there because we were young. We shouldn't have been so naughty, but what can you do? So we used to, all sorts of things, we would stamp and we'd whistle out. And peanut was a common thing, shoot a flying plane or something like that. Something would be there. Or all of a sudden there would be a whole bag, full of books, will drop right from the top, bottom to create a noise. Just that, sorry, it's happened like that. Any prank that we can think of. All the time there will be disturbances. Come here, Jessawala, come here, and slash, and go back. Once it so happened that somebody played a foolish mischief, and it must have struck the father himself, you see. And actually the culprit must be Jessawala. He says, come here. Is this the way that you behave, and this and that? And he gave me a long lecture. He says, kneel down, come on. And he lost his temper and he thrashed me. We used to have benching also. We had to bend down on the bench and they would slash on our fannies. So it's bend down and all. So all the thrashing that I had, of course, that was too much to bear now. Because why? Because I was not the culprit. I was not the criminal there, an innocent person. So I wouldn't want to bear it bravely or anything. So I rebelled against it now. And I didn't speak or anything. I just went there. And as soon as the class was over, I mustered all these non-Catholics. I said, come on, we should report. We can't bear all this this is insult like this sort of thing. So let's go to the principal. And I had the courage to go. Why? Because I knew my father had little, pull there, or the father depended upon my father. Means the principal depended on, if my father was the head of the engineering department and all that. So they had a technology section there. So my father was there. They knew